Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Willem from SGP Informatics, and Alex is online, who's also going to be speaking with me.
Hello.
So, using AI coding agents and how we can best prepare and manage for them from non-engineering scientists. So, a bit of background on this project. We were given a AI coded repo from a non-technical user to fundamentally review the functions of the code base to see if we can improve the pre-existing code in there, as well as the agent behavior around it. Most importantly, we wanted to kind of see if we could find easily implemented best practices around the AI, as well as how to maximize the quality for new projects. Because we're kind of anticipating from our non-technical users getting in projects that they've essentially vibe coded and expecting that to run on production pipelines. It's kind of how can we improve the code as much as possible before it gets to us.
In fact, that's happening already. So yeah, we are seeing more and more of that.
Yeah, I think the week we did this presentation, we got a request coming in from one of our lab managers. So our core position that we found after going through this is AI code agents are very useful, but they're not autonomous developers. They work best as engineering accelerators inside controlled workflows where you provide them with clear scope, controlled CI tests, and very importantly, human review. And we also found that domain knowledge matters a lot. If you don't know what you're trying to write against or write about, you won't really know whether the outputs are valid. Anything to add to that, Alex?
No, I think that's a good summary.
Okay, so where AI coding agents help, where they need guardrails. So they're very useful when the work is very tightly bound and understood. You don't want to tell them essentially fix my repo. Um, you're going to end up with quite a mess if you go that route. But if you do targeted things with them, for example, I'm struggling to write a module to do X, please help me. That kind of thing helps quite a lot with it. So it kind of helps to bound them that way and validate them quite frequently. And we also found that rather than starting to ask the question of can they write code, it becomes more of where do they fit within our workflows. So good examples we found with this is CI investigations when CI's builds are failing, writing documentation, repetitive cleanup for when you've got various places where code is duplicated, small code changes, and applying existing patterns. The risks we found was mainly when the work was broad, vague, very domain heavy or architecturally heavy. And in those cases, we found that often it would produce work that looks very reasonable on a surface level, but once you start digging into it, the wider intent behind what you were trying to do is very easily missed. Alex, anything to add?
No, please keep going.
So we found keeping the tasks very specific and verifiable to be highly important when working with this. So they work very well on tasks where the scope is very clear and you can very obviously validate the result. Examples include, I think we've run over some of these, but essentially it's boils down to you need to be able to verify what you're asking the AI to build. If you're not able to verify what it's building, you're running into lots of risks with it. The kind of main lessons we learned from using agents, I think the main two we evaluated was Claude and I think Codex. So we found that they're very useful for surfacing issues quickly, but they don't always fix them the right way the first time. You kind of have to poke and prod the AI to get it to do what you want, and the time spent doing that, you might just as well have fixed the issue yourself. Something else, we found that CIs kind of quickly flare up when those issues occur. And we also kind of found that even when you tell it unit tests and CI need to pass, you do need to tell it at the same time you need to actually fix the issues, not just skip them. I think we did have a few examples where the agents just entirely skip tests that were failing. See if there's anything I'm missing here. So the kind of, yeah, the useful pattern we found that any output it gives challenge the output, keep the scope narrow, and use feedback loops to kind of steer the change direction you wanted out of it. I hand over to Alex for this bit.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Willem. So, as we were saying, the point of this work was mostly to try and find strategies to uh, make the best of AI generated code coming in from our non-engineers, so our scientists and so on. And whether or not, I think as I'm sure there's many opinions of AI in this room, many of which will be quite negative, I'm sure. I'm relatively skeptical myself, but we don't have a say in whether or not this is happening, unfortunately. The scientists are just plowing ahead with or without us. So the plan is to kind of try and wrap around that what we can before that happens, which is actually how some of this discussion around template repos started that came up. And we'll be talking about later. But as Willem's been saying, I think really the key discovery is not a discovery at all. It's the same as good practice was prior to the kind of AI era, or whatever you want to call it, which is good development practice involves a strong CI loop such that you can catch problems before they're committed to the repo. But more specifically to getting these AI agents to program in a way which is less of a complete mess, I found that by far the most effective tool in that chain is Lizard. It doesn't have to be Lizard, but in short, a complexity analysis tool. So what I've found remarkably good results from is gating any changes that these agents make to a code base via a complexity check, which says, right, no, that's too complicated. You need to refactor that out. And by doing that, I think quite readily, we've managed to get code that's much more readable, much more maintainable out of these tools than we would have otherwise. I don't know if people are familiar with code complexity as a metric. I can't see anyone in the room because the camera's off. So I'm speaking to a blank screen. I don't think I can try and explain it to a blank screen. It would feel too strange. But yeah, if you are having similar issues with users coming in with AI code, I can strongly recommend Lizard as a CI tool to try and alleviate some of that. And importantly, it's language agnostic across at least all the major scientific languages. So we can run this on our Python, our Julia. And I use it in my own projects, even when there's no AI involved at all, because I think keeping your code low complexity is a good default. I can't see anyone, but but I'll hand back to Willem there if you're there, Willem.
Yeah, we have a question.
Yeah, I'm curious. Would you advise your racing ahead scientists to actually put that in their agents.md file or claude.md to use Lizard and keep complexity low?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's because as we were saying, we're getting repos in now from scientists, sometimes quite large repos, which have been written with AI. And the ones where you can tell they've been built over multiple sessions of Claude or Codex or whatever tool, they become, well, so spaghetti-like. And I think, yeah, just having as a default rule, right, I'm going to be doing some AI coding as for our scientists. Yeah, have each time you do a check or however you write it, run Lizard on the output of your work. I would absolutely advise that for the scientists because it doesn't really slow them down, since these agents will kind of work on it in a loop. They'll do some work, see that it fails, fix the failure, and so on. And I find that this means they fix the failure in a reasonably competent way.
Any other questions on Lizard? All right. So this presentation was initially given to our internal team, and I kind of felt like these questions can be applied to this wider group setting as well. So one, how do we implement these for our wider scientists? Is it just as simple as telling them, here's an agent on MD template, please implement this when you're working with AI? Then next question is, how do we get these best practices out to our scientists in a easy manner? Is it as simple as telling them here are template repos? Do we put it in Confluence, but Confluence's search engine is not always the best? Do we do it on something like Fred? And then kind of direct follow-up from that, what do we do with these lessons learned? Any thoughts from the room?
So you can't shut me up now.
Yeah.
It should be in the company knowledge so when you talk to Claude or ChatGPT, it suggests doing that. Because the first thing they'll do is ask, how do I do this? And it could, if you've got it, we get that into the company knowledge for these tools, then
I didn't know that was an option. That actually sounds like it would be a very good place to put some of these recommendations.
I think we need to push for that to happen.
Okay.
Yes.
Obviously, agreeing with what David said, but there's a number of ways we could look at doing that. One is by going to both of the enterprise licenses for Claude and ChatGPT and agreeing some defaults that we can get put in when you're doing that, do these kinds of things. Another way we could look at, it's a bit more broad brush, is to have the default repo. Anytime you clone something on GitHub or so on GitLab, you have a Claude MD and created with a standard set of kind of things there. That would mean we'd all have to agree to it because it would impact every new repo we'd ever created. But I'm strongly in favor of automating so people don't have to think about it, so they can change your secure default later if you can. On that note, I was wondering actually, we talked about some of these, but are there any other practices you have as well, like ensuring that things like secrets management and those kinds of things that we have on GitLab are turned on for any repos before you look at them, so that the agent can go through and fix anything it finds there before it gets to you, kind of thing.
So I think that's actually a almost very good segue into the next topic.
I think there might have been two hands up.
Yeah, there was a couple.
Is there hands up online? Sorry, I'm not seeing those. Thomas.
Yeah, hi. I'm actually putting together a set of guidelines for TICOM about how to use AI when you're developing code, and I have the same thoughts about how do we actually, propagate and educate and market these things. I think having it in company knowledge is a really good idea. Having probably some kind of umbrella AI resources somewhere in our documentation stack would be a good idea. I think maybe even in like the in-house training or inductions that we have, like this could be covered when you're learning about the farm or when you come into the Sanger. So I think there's lots of approaches, and we probably need a bit of everything.
I was going to say training basically, so it doesn't need to be long, but it just needs to say if you're thinking of doing this, this is the sort of thing you need to do. So you don't get somebody vibe coding a humongous thing.
Yes, definitely. And then Cindy also had a question online.
On the on the suggestion of add something to your agent file, whatever that may be, your agent MD or your skill MD that you're using. So what tends to happen is you end up needing a lot of rules for your agents to follow to improve their quality. Checking the complexity is one of them. Rather than increasing the size of your MD file that the agent has to have in its context, and then it will frequently forget some of those rules, and it'll happily run and not learn Lizard or whatever it was sometimes. So a better thing to do is have a very simple thing that says you must run make test, and then you have this make file that lists out all the commands that need to run, including running your complexity checker. And that's a simpler thing for the agent to get right and not forget about. And it's a simpler thing for you as a user to verify that it did.
Yeah, and that's absolutely how we're doing this. This is this is all built into CI that the agents have to run. It's not literally baked into the agent's MD file because, of course, you're quite right. It will then forget to do those things. Haytham has a question in the chat, which I could answer since I'm looking at it.
Go for it.
Should I read it since I don't know if people can see the chat?
I don't.
Yes,
Yeah,
please,
go
we
for it.
can't see it.
Sure. Okay. So Haytham asks, a somewhat predictable one from me is it worth emphasizing that it is not mandatory to use such agentic products? A lot of people new to coding might assume they have to use them in the work where that is not the case, and quite often the results will be better without them. Yeah, I mean, this is just my opinion, which doesn't necessarily stand for that much, but the problem is, specifically to the remit of this talk, it's not within, I mean, these are our scientists and our PhD students and our postdocs, and we have very little authority to emphasize or de-emphasize any tool usage. And I quite agree, really, that it would be better to have a more controlled approach, but the pace that the culture of scientific research demands, whether that's good or not, kind of outside of the scope of this discussion, I think it's quite difficult to stop people using, or certainly feeling like they have to use, anything which can accelerate their workflow, especially if you're doing a PhD or so on. So I think that might be quite difficult, but still worthwhile, because I agree with you that it probably would ultimately be better not to have everyone relying on these things. I don't know. I'm sure there's other thoughts in the room on that one, though. So.
Yes. One of the so this is something we've been looking at with SAMTools and HTSLib, because we're not just getting AI generated pull requests from just in Sanger. We're getting them from the world, in theory, although not too many have turned up so far. But yes, we got one from OpenAI, which encouraged us to actually get around to making a contributing guide on how to manage this. And the one we came up with actually was basically pinched from the Linux kernel, what to do with AI, which is basically, so we tell people they have to, firstly, they have to sign off their code to say they are able to contribute it under our license. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, basically, you tell us if you've signed it off, you're responsible for reviewing it, taking responsibility for everything you've written, ensuring it's compatible with the software license again. Yes, so basically, and then if you've used AI, you put an assisted by on your commit tag as well, so you can say what tool. So we'll see how that goes. But yes, so it's not banning everything outright, but it's saying you do have to take responsibility for your creations.
But Rob, I guess it's, on that, it's also kind of just codifying what you'd like any software developer to give you in VR, right? Isn't it?
Yeah. But yes, before you couldn't generate loads of stuff automatically. They didn't understand. It was less easy. Yeah.
Yep, I think that's everything I've got to cover.
Could I add one more thing?
Yeah.
I know mentioned around training earlier. I know there is like a working group. I know Priyanka's part of it around just AI in general for training, like when people come into the Sanger, and if people want to pick up like a course or something like that, it would definitely be worth having like a coding specific area to that. So I don't know if it's worth having a conversation with her or whoever else in that working group.
Yeah, I definitely think it is.
Agreed.
Right.
Or the repos, do you just want me to leave open the bullet points for that? Or
Yeah, I don't know. So sort of from the original tour that Alex and Willem did, we sort of were saying it would be, could we come up? Now this might be too tall an order or whatever, and fits in with what John was saying. Could we come up with some kind of template repo that people would get or be be pointed to by default that would have sort of best practice things turned on by default, so they sort of had to turn things off rather than work out how to put them on in the first place. And we thought this would be a good forum for talking and maybe talking about what should be in that. I don't propose that we actually make the repo with 20 people sitting here, but Willem and Alex came up, and I think Andy in your team came up with some stuff. So maybe we could put those up and we'll just have a read through. Is there anything? And does anybody want to be? I think it would work well if we had like a subgroup that met offline and came up with something and came back next time with their thoughts or findings.
So is this everything outside of the source folder then? So ignoring anything that the repo is actually about, just all of the things around it, and
This is essentially template repos to use as your starting point when you're trying to develop something, and then having different templates based on what you're going to be developing. For example, a web or data service repo, analysis algorithms, workflows.
okay.
So my experience is that if you provide a template that people can bring in, they work. So you have to kind of have the default set that it's automatically in, and then you kind of take it out. And I'm very mixed on that one because I've never yet met a software developer, myself included, that doesn't have a strong opinion of all of it. So turning up and saying, "Hey, good news! I've shoved this into your repo, and you haven't got any choice," is unlikely to go well. Unless people agree with that up front and know what they're kind of getting to. They know what to expect coming out of it, and they know that they can change it and adapt to it. That kind of thing.
There is the direction you're going as well, because pretty much everything I've made on both GitHub and GitLab, actually, I've started off outside of them and then pushed the results into it at a later point. So you don't get any templates.
I guess another pattern, although maybe I don't know, I wanted to come back to your point before I digress. I guess another pattern is having like really high quality reference repos, as in for each of these concerns, maybe 1 to 3 examples from Sanger where people can go to and be like, okay, this is the best, this is an example of it done really well. That does take time. I've looked at your various stuff, looked at toll stuff, but it takes a while to search around and kind of, but having that in one place could help. And maybe in terms of in terms of people who are opinionated, they can kind of choose from a menu.
I was just wondering, I mean, I think all of these things are good and should be provided. I'm just, like other people, I'm worried about putting it all in one repo. But something like a dev container might be an alternative. So this is a setup for using for development if you use it and connect it to VS Code. Just wondered, have you considered something like that?
I don't think any of these.
Oh.
Go for it, Alex.
Oh, I was just going to say that one of my issues with dev containers is I found when trying to use them with other users that they add quite a lot of friction to the process, especially for people who don't use VS Code. So I wonder if it's difficult to get people to use template repos. It may also be difficult to get them to use dev containers.
Yeah, true. Maybe we just need something simpler then. Maybe.
John, you want to get your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, one proposal we could end up with coming out of this, my proposal coming out of this is that we get a group of people who might have strong opinions. I know software developers strong opinions. For to coming up with the kind of thing that we're talking about there. And then we put it into a default repo. And we tell everyone we're going to do this. And then when we turn it on and we see what feedback we get. So when people are creating repos, they get this default template. If no one complains, great, we can put more in. I think I would say that. We can start building on it from there. We start with with being bold on the idea that we've got these strong opinions. These opinions come from experience about how we've tried to do things. Let's try and do that to make the wider institute development better, with the understanding that people can always change it if they want. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm volunteering to put my head above the parapet and do some of those changes, but I don't want to be the only person on that committee, because otherwise it will become what security thinks is best, and that's probably not what everyone else thinks is best.
The next one being enforced, and this is more of a recommendation, would it make sense to include documentation structures and something as well?
Yes, definitely.
It definitely opens up to any kind of suggested best practice if we can agree that across the institute, which is, well, a hard ask, but if we can, even if it's a basic set of things that we can start with.
Change to usually a little bit contentious thing.
I suppose one thing we might be missing is who are we expecting the users to be? Is it sort of scientists or is it software developers?
I think both.
Yeah. I mean, this originally came from I think the scientists sort of maybe more PhD loan developers in inverted commas, giving them somewhere to start. But
yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure. It's been a long time since I've done my PhD. I'm not quite sure what level of knowledge our PhDs have. Would they, do they even know about things like repos and GitHub?
I expect most of them probably don't even know about version control at all. Apart from that,
I mean, I can speak from a lot of experience on our end, and the answer is no. They usually don't know about version control or any of this. But that's the problem. It's exactly the problem we're having because we're on the AI front, because you have people who really don't have the tools to know what they want, asking for very large pieces of work. So I think this is wrapping something around that is really important.
Yes, I think I don't object to it existing. I'm just wondering if it's actually going to reach the users that you're intending without something else. So like a marketing exercise or all the training we've been talking about.
No, it's an important point. Yeah, I agree.
But my experience working in the faculty group that and I know Ian Vermes in Adams faculty has done a lot of work trying to teach people to do Git. Two things, keeping it very simple, and giving a simple message of why people should use it, and then getting the faculty team leader to buy into pushing it and saying you must do this, and then you get some success. So. And it is important, right? After Farmageddon, people, they must use it, really. Shouldn't be optional, shouldn't be saying, oh, they don't know about it. If they don't know about it, they should be told about it.
I say there's also a distinction between having tools that are sort of written by your PhD student, written for your own project, that's kind of only going to get used by you and maybe other people in the team, or that this being a published tool that Sanger is then on for like maintaining after you're finished here. And I feel like you'd be hard to have a more strict template guidance when in that latter case. The original. I don't know. It's worth making a distinction between those kind of uses, really.
I think there definitely is kind of that distinction we can make within uses, because you might write one of script, or you might, like you say, write something that's going to be fully maintained and supported, and the guidelines are different.
The only problem there is that, sorry, I can't see if I'm talking over people because I can only see the blank screen, but the only difficulty is that often with scientific programs, scripts turn into published tools and so on. And my other fear also is that sometimes very important papers rely on only scripts, and those scripts, if they are not well written, can contain some quite concerning bugs and incorrect results. That happens a lot more than I think anyone would like.
Yeah, I think it is a kind of a training thing again, which is that you get people just, if you're starting anything, you just type Git in it, and you've got a Git repository, and then remember to commit occasionally, and that's still 99% of the way there.
Yeah, I'd agree. The thing about encouraging to commit often.
Yes.
Because then if you make a mistake, you must go back. You've got a history. Make it, yeah, just very simple advice about how to use it.
That's just to plug the coding guidelines I'm sort of in the middle of coming up with. That's kind of the approach I'm taking. A very, very basic, minimal, what's the least thing you need to do? And obviously using some kind of version control, keeping secrets out of the directory, a few other things. But yeah, but then you've got to think about the other people who are using full agentic workflows as well. But they're very different use cases.
John?
Tom, you should build when your talk is. Sorry.
It's tomorrow at 11 in the Kendra.
There definitely need to be someone that's sort of like the owner or accountable for this sort of repo, because it will get out of date so quickly, I can imagine, because I know our stuff changes so quickly that it's hard to keep our stuff up to date, let alone maybe having a repo which is a how it should be done sort of repo.
And it needs to have running tests against it because you don't want people to get a copy of that repo and it's already fails its CI with nothing in. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where John was getting at as well, is we need a group of people, not just
Yeah.
Definitely.
Right, yeah, it needs owning. That's for sure.
So we can carry on talking over drinks about this, and we'll maybe put it on. We'll put it on the software developers, and maybe we'll set up a working group that way, and take it forward in a smaller group.
Sounds good.
Does that sound all right? So we'll not do anything without announcing it, so people can join in or not join in.
Actually, I had one more question, which was when you're getting this code coming in, was it committed via GitHub, GitLab, or just a file all going yoink catch?
Not even a tutorial, just a Python script file.
Okay.
Yeah, we got the latest one on an email, but we've attached to an email. But we've had many ranging from large, tens of thousand lines GitHub repos to, well, yeah, scripts attached to emails. We've had the whole range of AI coded stuff.
So I've got one more question, which is the people who are doing this, are they using Sanger provided license?
Good question. I have no idea, I'm afraid.
If they're using Sanger ones, then we can put something in the company knowledge, as people were saying that says you should be doing. Have you considered? We've got an internal GitLab, we've got that kind of, and it kind of prompts them. Now it's time to commit to your repo, that kind of a thing, and that would help push some of that behavior, maybe. But that won't help. Of course, they're not using one of the Sanger distributed ones that we can put that into.
What you just said, company knowledge, it has some sort of org-wide prompt.
There are enterprise prompts, I believe. I've least much knowledge about it, but yes, we can certainly find out more if there are people interested in that. I can already hear some people who have opinions on this that might be worth glomming into a community where we can start putting something together.
Because I wonder if sometimes with some of these things we're overcomplicating it, because maybe myself, I'm being quite naive that everyone uses GitLab and GitHub and that's just how it should be done and that's what we expect. But maybe there is, like you say, in our team not so much, but yeah, emails with scripts is a...
Please run my new website. It's at localhost left.
So yeah.
Actually, I wouldn't expect the agent, if it's any good, would probably, if you say write this, the first thing it might do is set up a Git repository locally and then start committing things to it. They seem to like committing things, these agents. And they do a sort of random walk around that to get to the solution you've requested. But,
some of our users are not using these agents on locally. They're doing this in a browser chatbot window and then copy pasting out the results, which means no repo.
Yeah. Right. I think we'll leave it there, shall we? We can carry on the discussion over drinks if you've got time. But thank you to everyone online. We're coming on YouTube soon.